All right, this is the Mystic River Boathouse Park Implementation Committee Park Management Subcommittee meeting. Today is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021. It's 5:00 p.m. and this meeting is being recorded. Just a reminder to keep your microphones on mute when you're not speaking. Also, to identify yourself for anybody that listens to this in the future or is listening now. And I'm Sandy Teixeira. I'm the recording secretary. And those present are Nick Keppel, Mike O'Neill, Richard Ward, Tim O'Brien, Rick Perkins, Mike Crowley, and Steve Planchon. Now, I think that's all I have, so you can take over, Chairman Keppel.
All right, well, let's commence with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We don't have any members of the public, so I presume we have no comments from the public. Correct?
Correct. We do have one user. I'm not sure who they are, but I don't know who they are. So there's no public comments.
It may be someone is using video for one piece and phone for the audio. So that's what happens a lot in the WebEx meeting I do with the court. Then we have the approval of the minutes of our December 1st meeting. Anyone want any questions out there? Anyone want to put a motion on the table to approve the minutes of our December meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes. This is Mike O'Neill.
Is there a second to the motion?
Mike Crowley, I'd second the motion.
All right, any discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote on the approval of the minutes of the December 1st subcommittee meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. So we'll move into a discussion, and I would just caution folks that this is a special meeting of this subcommittee, and so when we're in the discussion phase, we have to stay within the parameters of the items listed on the agenda. I don't see any reason. I'm not aware of any reason why we have to deviate, but I would just ask people to. And it turns out, because I failed to file our meeting notice, even though we approved it, I didn't get it to the town hall in time. So next Monday's meeting needs to be a special meeting as well. So while I've got a good subgroup, if anybody has anything that they particularly want to talk about at next Monday's meeting, let Sandy know, and she'll add it to the agenda so that we can actually take it up. Because otherwise, if you just arrive with a new idea, a new topic, we will not be able to take it up. After, at the March meeting and later on, now that I've filed a couple weeks ago, now that I filed our meeting schedule, but basically all meetings, I guess, within any meeting held within 30 days of when the filing of your annual schedule has to be a special meeting. So just please take note of that. So I'd like a couple of preliminary comments about these topics for discussion: the SHPO requirements, the park facility requirements, all the topics that are listed. The reason I suggested in either the October meeting or the November meeting that we consider having a park management subcommittee is I just wanted to move the discussion along about what was envisioned to go on at the park. I think through our December meeting and then some sidebar discussions that have been going on between Parks and Rec folks and the crew folks, and between crew folks and other town officials, in particular Danielle, our first selectwoman. I think there have been some additional considerations. So what I'd like to do tonight is do a quick run through of have folks report on some of those discussions, and then we can also have a more full discussion at Monday's meeting. But I've been asked twice now by Danielle, once in a discussion that I had with her, a phone call I had with her a couple of weeks ago with she and Susan Cullen, and then again today when I chatted with Danielle. She has inquired about whether there's really a need for this park management subcommittee. I don't feel super strongly about this subgroup needing to meet and continue to meet. All I wanted to do was move the discussion along about who's doing what at the park and with park-related activities. So we can take up with the full committee on Monday this question of whether the continued functioning of the subcommittee will be useful. I don't have any super strong views about it, but I just wanted this subcommittee to know I'm not wedded to the idea. With a bigger group, it's harder to sometimes. I've in my rather extensive experience on boards and commissions and committees. Sometimes when you task a subgroup, it's easier to kind of crystallize things and move things along. Anyway, as far as SHPO, I got a note from Deb Downey that said she and Susan Cullen are hard at it, finalizing the submission. But at this point, I'll see what her note said to me just from today. Let me pull it up. That she could not attend today. And essentially what she reported, here we go. She says, Nick, I apologize. I'm unable to make this subcommittee meeting this evening as I have a conflicting meeting. As an update, in the remediation grant application, which will be provided to the committee in February next week, we plan to include moving the house per the SHPO requirement and the master plan, but the grant application will not include any house renovation, as that would not fall into the category of remediation. At this time, there's no town money available for renovating the house. Just an idea, but perhaps rather than just focusing on how the town might use the house, the subcommittee could discuss a strategy to look for opportunities or partnerships with nonprofits or others that might allow renovation and use of the house in the future. Thanks, Debbie. I believe there'll be more on that topic when Mike shares his comments about some discussions that have been ongoing. So that's
Nick. Sorry, who is that from? That note from?
Deb Downey.
Okay, thank you.
Who's the Board of Selectmen liaison to our committee, who has been, even though she's only been involved since last spring, she's been extensively involved. And I guess because she's an engineer and has experience with remediation stuff. So she's been very helpful with Susan on helping to prepare the what's it called, the cleanup, the remediation, help me out, Mike, these funds from the state are what the
remediation grant.
Remediation.
Yeah, remediation in particular. Anyway, So we can discuss. I think we'll have their intention. Susan and Deb's intention is to circulate a draft application for the committee's consideration on Monday, because I believe it has to be in either later in February or March. The discuss park facility requirements. Mike can touch upon that. So on the potential town park and recreation activities, I just like to give a quick comment that I had extensive discussions with Leanne and with Rich Ward. It's clear that, and of course, that they were preceded by discussions with Rich and Mike Crowley and Mike O'Neill and the crew folks. So I think there has been in the last 6-9 months more extensive discussion about the possibilities of the town rec department making some use of it, mindful that from a budgetary standpoint, the town's ability to do things is obviously limited. Very obvious to folks like Leanne and Mike and Rich. And by the way, one of the challenges that we've had in recent months was once SHPO said the building had to be moved, we've been kind of trying to figure out what role would the building have in the life of the park and the rowing center. And then discuss Friends of Stonington Crew interests. I'll let Mike respond to that topic, and possible alternative funding sources for the project. Mike can speak to that as well. So I think I'd like to hear from maybe you, Mike, and then Rich Ward and or Mike Crowley, and then we'll open it up for general comment. So Mike, do you want to talk about kind of a combination of Friends of Stonington Crew / Hart Perry Rowing Center interest, and then as well as the park facility requirements and alternate funding sources?
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I've been working hard to try and figure this out, and I did have a chance to sit down with Danielle earlier in the week, just to try and get a better understanding of where the town is. And kind of our goal, or my goal for this subcommittee with Friends of Stonington Crew, is just to really kind of do two things. One, understand how the park is going to be utilized, kind of understand what our role in the park is going to be, who's going to manage it, how the facility is going to be used, and what needs to be, programmatically in the buildings themselves in order for the park to operate as a park. So there's been a lot of conversation about different aspects. Danielle and I and Susan had a good conversation on Monday, and a couple things came out of it. One is that they did kind of reach out to the state for funding for the building through SHPO, and it sounds like that's a total dead end. They ran into the same kind of group that we ran into when we first started talking to them. They're very uncooperative, difficult to work with at best, and we're of little or no help. So it doesn't sound like they're going to contribute in any way or form towards the building itself. Danielle expressed a concern that the town has, no money put aside to do the renovation on the house. Susan did mention that they are incorporating at least the site-based activities into the grant funding application. So, kind of through that process, we talked about a couple things. One is that the Friends of Stonington Crew basically initially was looking at a boathouse, a self-contained boathouse that had all of its own facilities, all of its own requirements, and the house got added on top of that. So we never really envisioned the house. It wasn't part of our program, but it is a reality to the park and something that we have to deal with now. So based on that, we've been kind of re-looking at the boathouse building and the house building. And what I proposed to Danielle and Susan is that we're looking now at really stripping the boathouse down to a very simple structure. So it'd largely be a barn type structure, no insulation, limited heating capability, or kind of a 2-story garage with a kind of loft space above it. We'd still have to put an elevator in it to be able to have the upstairs space as training facility, but other than that, it would be a very simple building. And through that process, what I proposed is we would move all of the utilities, bathrooms, any of those types of activities into the house. So we would reduce the budget for the boathouse, which would give us a budget to do build out on the house. That would allow us, and I think, and Danielle and Susan agreed, there is going to be a need for public bathrooms in the park. I don't see how we can have this park without public bathrooms. I don't see how we could run basic programs or do most of what we're talking about without having facilities on site. And I really feel that that is a kind of the town responsibility to manage those facilities. I don't think it should be the Friends of Stonington crew that have to manage public bathrooms for the town of Stonington. So what I proposed to Susan and to Danielle is that the Friends of Stonington crew would take care of the build out of the house. We'd build the changing rooms, we'd build the bathrooms, we'd use the second floor of the house for office space, and we'd partner with the Dennis and the Quap Swiss Nature Center to try and basically utilize the combined buildings. So not only the house, but the boathouse building. They have an interest in being able to have classes, do activities. They don't have any large space in their facilities. We would have to make the training space flexible enough that we could put our ergs and equipment away and be able to set up tables for classroom activities and lectures and things like that. But that is kind of what the path we're on right now. It would require the town paying for remediating the house, for moving the house, and kind of the foundation for the house. Those could all be covered in the grant proposal because the foundation is a capping activity. I don't think they'll pay for the physical move of the house, but I believe we can get remediation funds in for doing the asbestos removal in the house. I'll have to defer to Susan and Deb on that, but I believe that it's a possibility. I think that's kind of the best structure that I can see in order to kind of move forward and get the ball rolling on this project. So I've drafted a kind of a beginning MOU. I've sent it to Danielle. I copied Nick to take a look at. It's the discussion piece as a starting point. But what I'd like to try and work towards is kind of a agreement between the Friends and it's actually a new organization called the Stonington Community Rowing Center LLC, which is a new 501c that we're putting together to manage kind of the public rowing aspect of the park process. But we'd like to kind of keep moving on that process and get a contract together, get a lease agreement together. I shared, Nick, the lease that the Friends had put together with you as a template for Danielle to take a look at. But it'd be nice to get that as a consideration as well, and to get some movement on it as well. But that's kind of the crux of the conversations we've been having for the last few days. I do have meetings with the NPC just to kind of, we've just had a couple quick phone calls. They've made no formal commitments to this, but they are very interested in working with us on the project. So I think we can jointly fundraise for it and jointly, hopefully come up with the money and kind of attach at the hip to try and utilize the facilities. So that's the plan.
Mike, I had one question. First off, to put a fine point on, I get on the SHPO aspect, I guess Danielle and Susan both, who had not, of course, been able, they weren't in their respective roles. They had a conversation with SHPO just for the rest of the committee's subcommittee's benefit. So Danielle and Susan had a conversation with SHPO because Susan was hoping to explore some other historic, funding, grant opportunities. But apparently SHPO told them that because the taking down of the shed, and I guess maybe even moving, I don't know, I don't remember the particulars, but something about what was agreed upon, and I know the committee members all remember, for whatever reason, SHPO, even though they approved that they struck the agreement, they still went on record as saying this was an adverse
Impact.
And apparently because of that, there's no other, they're not prepared to bless and endorse and support the pursuit of other historic grant opportunities that come within their purview. So basically, the price we paid for, getting to be able to move the building and deal with the building and do the park was we were cut off from other opportunities. Personally, I'm not sure how meaningful and significant those other grant opportunities might have been, but that's what when you were referencing Mike, SHPO continuing to be a challenge, that's what specifically the reaction was. And I think Susan in particular was surprised. She had been unaware that was one of the repercussions of the agreement. The other, I'll come back. There was something else that you mentioned that I wanted to inquire about, but anyway, oh, I know what it was, Mike. In seeking to have a more, I want to be careful how I describe it, a more simple, rather, I won't say bare bones, we'll say a simple building. Are we talking roughly the same design as we presented to the?
Yeah, the design is identical on the outside.
Okay.
The difference would be rather than building out the inside, so sheetrock, formal lighting plans. I met with the fire commission, and they said if we could keep the building largely open, so there's transmission between the first floor and second floor, so like a big open staircase, we wouldn't need to put a full fire protection system in, which is $100,000 undertaking on a building that size. So what we found is there's about $300,000 or $400,000 of things we can take out of the boathouse, and in turn, if the town can take the first couple steps with the house, that would go a long ways to getting the house rebuilt. The other kind of piece is that with SHPO, is part of SHPO's requirement is the house needs to be surveyed, and I'm not totally sure how that works because I don't have enough experience with this organization, but part of the agreement the town made is that the house will be built out to a level required by SHPO, and then the first step of that is they do a historic survey of the building to determine what needs to be kept and what can be replaced. And that is not in the initial budgets that I put together. I made some assumptions, largely that we were going to replace most of what's there, but that is a requirement that they're going to hold us to. So if we're keeping every stick and staple and straightening out crooked pieces of wood, it's going to be more expensive than if we can just replace the siding and replace the rotten trim and replace the rotten roof and replace the damaged stuff that's there. So again, we need to get through that step.
Questions for Mike?
Hi, Nick, it's Steve. I got a couple questions. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
So first off, I give you credit, Mike, for trying to figure this out to try to shift funds from one spot to the other. But do you think it's possible to rough in the boathouse? So if we ever want to put heating, cooling, electric and sheetrock in insulation later, we can do it without having to tear into it?
Yeah, I think basically what we do is it'd be open cavity wall. So there'd be nothing sealing the walls up. So we could always, but I got a bid from a timber framer that gave us a very aggressive bid on a very simple timber frame building. And they actually are going to donate $100,000 towards the project. This is a guy I do a lot of work with. And that's kind of the way I'm leaning. It's just a very traditional timber frame barn. It would have a solid wood deck between the first floor and second floor, open frame on the second floor, not insulated. But the reality is, like for the crew team, we're primarily using it, during the warmer months of the year, and in the wintertime, we've trained in plenty of unheated buildings, so the kids make the heat pretty quickly. So it would affect the ability to use it for other things. It wouldn't be a great place to have a event in the middle of winter because it'd be brutally cold in there. But for our activities, it'd be fine. So again, it's not quite the building we initially envisioned, but obviously things happen. So we got to adjust to the realities of where we are in this project. So I think it could be a phased situation where we could start with this, and then as time goes on and we raise some more money, we could come in at a later date, do a build out, insulated, do all that stuff. So I don't think we're precluding anything. We're just kind of moving some funds around so that we can deal with the house.
Right. So my other question would be about SHPO, and this is for everybody. Who can get the information from SHPO on the actual list of what we need to do, whether it's nails, sheathing, roofing, so this way they give us what they need, so it's not a guessing game like it seems to be with those folks.
Yeah, that's this survey process, Steve. So that's kind of the next step. So I need to find out whether there's like a authorized person we need to hire to do that. If they need to do it personally, I haven't worked with them enough. I don't know exactly how that works, but that seems to me kind of one of the next things we should undertake with SHPO and kind of as this committee is to find out specifically what guidelines they're going to impose on the town to remediate this building. But they have said that we can lose the porch that is on the building now. When we were in conversations with them, kind of the last time, I mentioned that look, the shingles are at end of life, the siding's at end of life, and they were pretty nebulous how they responded to that. So my guess is they want to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah. So the other question would lead to, like, if we're going to have bathrooms in there for the town, will they allow us to put exterior doors from the park into the house to get to the bathrooms as opposed to going into the front door and find the bathrooms?
Well, we're going to have to, SHPO is one agency. There's also other agencies that require ADA. So we're going to have handicap accessible entrance and egress in and out of the building. We're going to have to, so they may want to preserve the building, but the building has to function, in its intended purpose at the end. And so that's kind of the other reason we need to kind of have a meeting with them on site and go through the realities. So part of what I've proposed to the town is that the Friends would pick up, on the design process we started and complete that, for the house and the barn in conjunction with the town, in conjunction with the DNPC, to kind of figure out exactly how we're going to do all this. The firm that we chose to do the architecture, I don't know if you all will remember, but we were kind of driven to them because of SHPO. They were experts with dealing with them and had a lot of experience. So that is going to be part and parcel to trying to get this done, is to have someone who has a working relationship with SHPO and understands how to deal with their idiosyncrasies.
Yep.
Well, and
Hey, Nick.
yes, Mike, go ahead.
Mike, yeah, I like the idea the way you're going now. We'll keep it simple. It's going to be a pain in the butt working with SHPO, so we'll have to feel it out as we go, I guess.
Yep.
So at least I think we're taking a step in the right direction. Mike, would you send Rich and I a copy of that MOU that you sent to Leanne?
Yeah,
Danielle.
yeah. Nick, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Fine by me. And I think this is all, this is all wonderful news that, the rowing center, because I prefer, Mike, to describe the rowing piece of this as the rowing center because, Friends has done a fabulous job for 20 years, but we all know that Friends has a job unto itself to run and support the high school rowing program. So I think, part of what we need to do is have a uniform lexicon. Our language needs to be, we need to be on the same page, and it's the rowing center that will do the rowing piece of this. And I think it's great that you're being creative about how the building is going to be built, and have come up with some terrific ideas about how to utilize the house so that it doesn't become an albatross on the town's neck. And the engagement of other nonprofits like the Nature Center who could also benefit from it. That's all fantastic stuff. I do think though that and that we certainly have to don't do it tonight or in the next 2 weeks, but the sooner that a vision of how this park and the boathouse and the building are going to function can begin to emerge, recognizing that it's going to be fine-tuned. And I had hoped and didn't pull it off, and I'm not sure it really should be me that does it, but I would love in the next couple of months if we could try to create a week in the life of the park, including the boathouse, and just have a writing of what the calendar, what would happen at this place. If we were to describe it to someone coming from Siberia or wherever, that here's what goes on, in the late summer 22 or 23, whenever we think that this operation is going to be fully functioning. I'm not talking about where the bathrooms are in the house versus the boathouse. I'm talking about what's going to go on in the green space, the docks, the second dock area, and in particular things like it, and I'm reminded of the harbor management folks wanted us to, they envision that separate dock as a landing area for yachts. Well, like I can only speak for myself. That is not what I envision personally as the highest and best use of that dock. I envision that dock as a place where someone, either the rowing center or the nature center or the town, teaches kayak lessons or paddleboarding lessons, or things like doing a historic tour of the Mystic River in a kayak that either the Mystic River Historical Society does, or the Nature Center does, or the town does. But that dock is a jumping off point for those kinds of activities. And I think, there's enough nerds like me who would love to have basically a paddling lecture of the seaport and its history and all these historic homes. And they would pay to do that. And that's one of about, 80 different things, whether it's the Cub Scout outing or, on and on and on, the paddleboard lessons, kayak lessons, environmental education, countless different environmental education things that, my daughter Rebecca worked for Save the Bay. And, that's an organization that basically has all kinds of staff and they do all kinds of programs, basically just introducing the public to the Narragansett Bay watershed. So, there's a lot of things that can be done by different folks, but I think we're far enough along that we should start to try to project what these things are, and sort out is the use of are we going to let that dock be full of dinghies from yachts that are moored off the obviously I'm using that as sort of an extreme example because that's one that I think we can check off the list pretty quickly. But I talked with Leanne and Rich both, and they're go ahead, Rich.
Just to interject there, that was on my short list, the things that you are describing, Nick. This is the first time that I'm hearing about yachts and their dinghies wanting to dock up on the second dock. But so that is on my short list. I did get a curve thrown here, and my thought process went towards the house at that. I like what I'm hearing now, Mike. I know that you went through a lot of angst and all of this stuff, but I think it's more of a match having the Nature Center more involved with the program. If there is an interest, I hope that comes through. I think it's more pertinent with what they have and what they are bringing to the table than our recreation programs and so forth. My mind was always on what was going to happen in the park and what was going to happen out on the water. And if it's paddleboard lessons or tours of historic nature, Save the Bay lectures of some sort and everything like that, that's what my focus was. I like hearing where we're going right now. And the distraction that I had the last several weeks was, what am I going to do with that house? So I like the idea of this direction again. But yeah, Nick, it is. I don't know if you guys got a chance to look at the PDF that I sent out just before the meeting. It was a post. That's always been on my mind as far as being able to do things like that in the park. A big hurdle of that is, where do people literally park? Where do people congregate? Where do people go? What facilities are there? If it is, 3-4 stall bathrooms, can we have one size group versus another size group? All of those things are still up in the air, but that's kind of the direction that I'm going with. And until we have the exact measurements on what we can do and bathroom wise, facility wise, parking wise, I don't know if I can map out, okay, on Monday, we're going to have this class, on Tuesday, we're going to have that class, until I have that kind of information.
No, but I'm just looking, Rich, I hope you sent this to everybody, right? Your blog. But that's exactly, well, to me, one of the key things that we have to begin with is, so you've got on your blog, kayaking, paddleboarding, family picnics, marine science and education programs, sunset and full moon guided tours, winter indoor training and fitness classes, dragon boating and youth summer camps are just a few of the seasonal programs. The year-round strength training, youth and fitness, safety and boating certification courses, bird watching, public park access, and then I'm sure there's others. What I'm suggesting is that we should try to begin to agree on the types of activities that we've all known the potential. Let's begin to sort it down, and then who's in charge of doing those things then can be the subject of further refinement. But I just worry that there's at this point, and of course we need to begin to build a consensus that is the rowing center going to do predominantly like 90% rowing and maybe an occasional something else, or are they going to do exclusively rowing related stuff, which will be a full, which I think had been, Mike, am I right that you all from the beginning were envisioning that the boathouse and the rowing center would maybe not exclusively, but the overwhelming predominance of what you were going to be involved in was community rowing. The high school rowing program and community rowing. Novice to masters, but predominantly rowing. You don't covet doing paddleboarding and kayaking classes. So, but but if you don't do it, then the question becomes, who else does it? Now, there's a possibility, because the possibilities are the rowing center, the town, nature center, or another, another nonprofit could be created to do stuff that the town doesn't have, isn't within the town's power zone, or the rowing centers. But as you remember from the Como, Rich, the Como did lots of things, even though it didn't have paid staff to do them. They would use independent contractors to do things. So, there's lots of things that can go on there that aren't part of the charter of whoever sponsors them, but there still has to be a decision of who's going to coordinate all that. So that if, and things like, if there's going to be a yoga class or a spin class, but let's say yoga because it's so portable, do I sign up for that yoga class with the rowing center on their website, or do I do it, with the town rec department? I don't think we need to nail down every little nuance here, but I think we need to begin to plan who may be coordinating these different roles. And I think
Nick, excuse me. Nick, that's what that MOU is all about. That makes you plan, assume responsibilities, and that why that is so important.
Yep.
And then all this discussion will come up, and then we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah. We had also talked about it in the past about having like a calendar where it's seen by all groups, and we figure out who's going to manage them. Like you said, maybe that other third party, whatever, and then just because you got to figure out, okay, when the meets are happening, when's Rich's class is happening, when something else happening, Mike's got something going on here, Mike Crowley's got, so it's got to be all encompassing, and we all have to be able to manage it, whether it's through the town webpage or through the rowing center's webpage or whatever, but it's got to be centralized so, we can all figure out what's going to go in there once we figure out all these different things that are going on, and then just work from that one page or that one calendar.
Steve, you're exactly right. And just if I could say a couple of things. One, Rich, to your concerns, one of the things I think the way this is going to roll out is, Nick, to your question, Stone Crew is going to do rowing. We're going to do rowing and rowing training and rowing related stuff. I see the nature center basically doing education activities, kid intensive programs, and one of the benefits of them is they have a parking lot across the street. So they don't have to park at the boathouse. They could literally bring people to the nature center first, walk across the street, have an activity, walk back. So it does help again with something that's a struggle in the park of where do you put people when they show up. So, and then I see, an opportunity for the town to do other outdoor recreation activities, because, we're using somewhere between 20 and 30% of the building at any given time. On a utilization basis. So there's going to be blocks of time available to do other things. And Steve, to your comment, that's a calendar. It's a calendar where we punch in all of our rowing regattas, all of our programs, and then, PNC does the same, and Rich, you do the same, and say, okay, on Tuesdays, it's yoga in the park, and that's run by the town of Stonington. On Wednesdays, it's looking for critters in the water, and it's done by the nature center with a bunch of kids kayak. So, but I think it's a pretty easy thing to do. It's going to require us getting ahead of it and, putting the thing together at the beginning of the year and then abiding by it. But I think it's a pretty easy thing to do. And again, one of the things that I have suggested, and I think it'd be helpful, is if we all went up to Glastonbury and look at what they've done, because they've done a very effective job at just that. They have 2 or 3 different groups using their facilities. They all work together. The rowers use it in certain times. The town uses it in other times, and then they got a couple private vendors that are using it as well. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It's been done many times before. I'm sure we can come up with a relationship where everybody gets kind of what they need out of this building, and there's plenty of time in the day and month to do it. So
And I agree 100% with what Mike, if you remember early on when we first met and started talking about that, we actually had that vision of mapping out a calendar. And I think we got distracted about moving the house instead. So it was always something that is there in the back of my mind as a programmer myself and so forth. So I think we had that on the table from day one, at least in my mind we did. And it's something that we could certainly all work together. Who manages that calendar? We have the resources. I do it at Spelman Park between the school facilities and so forth. Very easily to be able to do the same over there. And it's just a matter of putting the paper, setting the priorities. That's what, as Mike Crowley mentioned, the MOU will set the priorities. Who has first dibs? And obviously the rowing and those programs in the schools will have the first dibs on the calendar, and then we'll fit the pieces thereafter. Second dibs would be the nature center and what goes on in the building and in the house if they come on board, and then so forth. So that I believe is something that could very easily be done.
Yep. If I could say one more thing, just Mike Crowley, I'll get you the MOU, but I'd like to have Danielle and Susan look at it and just review it first before I distribute it to a broader group. I just want to make sure they're okay with it before I get anybody else looking at it. Okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But the only thing is they're going to get a hold of Richie and myself anyway. But as long as we keep working together, we'll get there.
Yep.
So the biggest thing is taking care of the building and get the park built, figure out the park. And so, this stuff here, this MOU, Richie's been through this a lot. We have it with the schools, which is a lot bigger project than this one. And I'm sure we can work it out. So I don't think that's a big deal.
I agree.
I agree too, Mike. It's just that we spent a lot of time, and it was time well spent to lay out to physically lay out a master plan of the space. And Mike and his group have spent a lot of time pursuing different paths about the boathouse. But and I have no illusion that this is going to be an overnight exercise. It'll be basically another year that we're fleshing it out. But the sooner we can begin to be sharing a vision about these things, the better, because we've been at this, most of us, for 3 or 4 years. You get people like our new member and other people in the community, they don't know anything, and the sooner we can at least begin to flesh out the core activities of what we all think we envision going on there, mindful that there's a lot of detail that have to be worked out. I'm not talking about where we're well away from, when the Denison Pequot Seapost folks come over for environmental and they want to launch some kayaks from the smaller dock. We know they can't go, when they're launching boats, when your kids are launching boats, they have to go around the building, in front of the building, and down to the separate dock, because you can't, it's a site that can engage in multiple activities, but they have to be coordinated. And I'm not saying we need to start doing our signage yet, but we have to have some sense of what we hope would go on there. And the sooner we can, like your blog, I think is a good beginning, Rich.
But Nick, behind that blog right there is another 10, 15 pages that I have that I am starting to map that out. Be assured, please. But it is something that I do have an idea, and again, it's just like what they do over at Spicer House. We do something similar.
Right.
They do over at Spicer House in Groton. So it's a lot of what ifs behind it, but it is something that I am starting to, and I'll be able to roll that out now that I can get my focus on the park and what we can use it as. So.
And Mike, because the full committee may be curious, Danielle said today that we're probably not going to know about the brownfields money. That was the term that I was looking for before. The brownfields money. We're probably not going to know about it until summertime or thereabouts, maybe fall. So, am I right that hard as it is to say that we're probably looking at 23 to having a fully functional park and boathouse, right? I mean, if we don't get the money from the state till the fall, then it has to. I don't know.
Probably. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, this isn't a huge project. Sadly, it's an acre and a half. It won't take long to do the park work. It's getting to go. That's the unknown here. Once we get to go, particularly if like the boathouse building's a timber frame, that's going to go up in a matter of a couple of weeks. That's not a very intensive building to put up.
Okay.
The renovations on the house, don't really know what they are yet, but it's not a very big house. So,
all right. So
it's really just getting to go. That's the hard part here. We got to get a green light from the state, and again, even once they say we're going to get the money, as we saw before, it may take a while to get it. So then it'll be the question of, is there an instrument we can use with the town, if we know it's coming, to get started sooner, going with it, or do we have to wait till it physically hits the bank account before we can go? I'd like to. I mean, kind of my hope, Nick, is to get and part of my hope of this committee is to get to the point where we know what we're doing, so we can get all of our planning done, all of our design work done, be shovel ready to go, if and when we get the money.
Okay. And you're hoping that the MOU plus, especially if by the summer or thereabouts, we get positive feedback from the state. You're hoping that you don't think it's going to take you 2 or 3 years to raise what you need to raise for. Okay. No, I think again, it's all about managing expectations and also to some extent setting expectations. So, maybe 22, we'll leave the door open to something happening in 22. So my point being, we have time to flesh things out, but I think more and more we should be beating the same drum about not dinghies from the yachts parked out in the river, but rather other things, the environmental education, the kayaking, obviously the rowing, the just enjoyment, different ways to enjoy the green space, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. We're approaching an hour. Because we have another meeting next week, I want to be prudent with people like everybody, but Mike, you probably have 4 or 5 meetings a week at this point, town meetings?
Yeah.
And Mike O'Neill as well, right? I mean, Mike.
That was Mike O'Neill.
Tim O'Brien. I mean, is Tim still with us? Tim probably had.
I see his name.
He's still here, but he's on mute.
All right.
Multitasking.
Yes, I love it. So any questions or comments before we move on? We don't have any comments from the public, so.
This is Steve. I got one comment from Mike O'Neill. So I like the idea of this timber framer that's actually going to give you a break or some money towards it. I don't have the reach you do, but I do have quite a few contract companies that I use at work that I'd be willing to ask if they'd like to bid with a family discount, the Planchon family discount, So don't hesitate if you want some help trying to get contractors that might work with us at a discounted rate, but still do their quality work. So.
Yeah, we've been talking, like there's an electrician who's been very helpful to the crew team, whose kids go through the program, and he's agreed to do all the legwork for the electrical side, for the permitting and design work and all that. So we're definitely gonna rely on friends and family to try and put this whole thing together.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All right then. Hearing none, we'll see you all, or most of you, I hope, next Monday at 6, right, Sandy?
Monday, February 1st at 6 p.m.
Yes. All right, and remember, anybody wants to bring something up that's not, we're basically going to use the agenda essentially from the last meeting. Those will be the topics. If anybody else has a different topic, like Mike O'Neill, should we add the MOU?
I was just going to say, as long as Danielle and Susan and Town Hall is okay with it, that would be a good conversation piece to have at that meeting.
Right, and I think the whatever category we have as a report from friends, I would argue is enough of a category that we could talk about the MOU within that.
Okay.
And let's do you agree, Mike? From now on, we should discuss rowing center interest rather than I'm not going to try to dictate your brand, but unless it's going to be the Friends of the Zonington crew that runs the boathouse, then we should. They're going to.
No,
yeah.
we should start talking in terms of this new LLC we put together, because it was formed specifically for the public aspect of the crew program.
Yep. Okay.
Should I change the agenda to reflect that?
Yes, it should say Hart Perry Rowing Center interest.
No, it should say Stonington Community Rowing Center,
Okay.
SCRC.
And it's the Hart Perry Boathouse, right?
Correct.
I plan on putting the agenda out for the meeting tomorrow afternoon, so that's just a heads up to that too.
Okay. So, Rich, if you want to fight for those dinghies to be able to continue to dock at the other dock, then you have until tomorrow afternoon to add something to the agenda for the cause of the transient yacht owners and their rights.
Continue to dock there, Nick? I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Are they already docking there?
No kidding. The Mystic Harbor Management Commission said we have a need, because they have people that are parking their dinghies, all over, at the Cottrell Park. Maybe it was the Cottrell Park people, but
Okay.
someone saw a potential dock there and said, "Oh, let's make that, the end point for transient boats in the harbor of the Mystic River." And
Yeah,
that
so
was
they
why
can
500.
walk up.
What's that?
I said, so they can walk up and get ice cream.
That's right. That's right. But that's
Nick,
not
I
why.
make a motion, we adjourn.
All right.
I second that motion.
All those
Good
in
night.
favor, signify by saying aye.
Wait, who
Aye.
seconded the motion?
Mike Crowley.
Well, who?
Mike Crowley made the motion.
Who
And
seconded?
Steve Planchon.
Aye.
All right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Good
Aye.
night. Motion carries. Thank you
Have
all.
a good
for your
night,
time.
everybody.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Bye bye
take care.
now. Thank you, Sandy.
Good night. You're welcome.
Thanks.